Number 9. Bagger 288. Imagine standing next to a machine as tall as a 30-story building. In 1978, Germany needed a better way to mine coal. The old machines were too slow, and engineers needed something much bigger. So the German company Krupp created a giant mining machine called Bagger 288. This machine was built to remove huge amounts of earth from open pit mines. It was not like a normal excavator. It was a moving factory. Bagger 288 was about 240 meters long. That is longer than 2 football fields. It stood around 96 meters high, almost the height of a skyscraper, and it weighed about 13,500 tons. That is heavier than more than 2,000 elephants. The machine could dig thousands of tons of material every hour. But moving this giant was not easy. It moved slowly on huge tracks across the ground, and it needed a team of engineers to operate safely, but this was only number 9, because the next machine was even bigger. Number 8. Liebherr T282B. Most trucks carry tons of cargo, but this truck carries what normal trucks cannot. In the early 2000s, mining companies were digging deeper, and they needed stronger trucks that could carry hundreds of tons in a single trip. The answer was the Liebherr T282B. This giant mining truck was one of the largest trucks ever created. It was more than 14 meters long, almost as long as a passenger airplane. Its giant tires were taller than an average person, and each tire could cost tens of thousands of dollars. But the most incredible part was its carrying capacity. The truck could carry around 360 tons of material in one trip. That's like carrying more than 50 elephants all at once. To move that enormous load, the truck needed thousands of horsepower. It was built to travel through massive open pit mines, carrying huge amounts of rock from one location to another. But speed was not the goal. The goal was to move as much material as possible in as few trips as possible. And even this giant truck was only the beginning, because engineers were already building something even more extreme. Number 7. NASA Crawler Transporter. Moving a rocket is one of the hardest engineering challenges. NASA needed a machine that could transport massive rockets safely, so engineers built the Crawler Transporter. This giant machine carried rockets from the assembly building all the way to the launch pad, and it had to move them without damaging the rocket. The transporter was enormous. It was almost as wide as a highway and weighed more than 2,700 tons. That's heavier than hundreds of fully loaded cars. But the most surprising thing was its speed. The machine moved slowly, very slowly. Its top speed was only about 1.6 kilometers per hour. A person could easily walk faster, but speed was never the goal. Strength and stability were, because on top of this machine sat some of the largest rockets humans have ever built. Every movement had to be carefully controlled, because one mistake could damage a rocket worth millions of dollars, and somehow this giant machine carried them safely to the launch pad. But even this machine wasn't the biggest, because the next one is so long it looks more like a giant moving bridge, and it gets even bigger from here. Number 6. F-60 Conveyor Bridge. Mining needs more than giant digging machines. It also needs giant machines to move all that material. In Germany, engineers created one of the longest machines ever built, the F-60 Conveyor Bridge. This machine was designed to transport soil and coal across huge mining areas, and its size was incredible. It was about 500 meters long. That is longer than 5 football fields placed end to end. It looked more like a massive steel bridge than a machine. Thousands of tons of steel were used to build this giant structure. And it wasn't just a giant bridge sitting in one place. The F-60 could slowly move across the mining area while continuing to do its job. Imagine a structure longer than 5 football fields, slowly moving across the ground while transporting massive amounts of material. That's what made the F-60 so unusual. It combined the size of a bridge with the power of a giant industrial machine. But even this moving steel giant wasn't the biggest machine humans had ever created, because the next machine would take size to another level. Number 5. Prelude FLNG. Not every giant machine moves on land. Some float on water, and some are so large they look like entire cities floating in the ocean. The Prelude FLNG is one of the largest floating structures ever created, built for offshore gas production. This giant facility was designed to collect and process natural gas at sea. Instead of bringing the gas back to land, it could process it offshore. And its size was incredible. The Prelude is about 488 meters long. That's longer than 4 football fields placed end to end. Inside this massive structure are huge processing systems, pipes, storage areas, and other equipment. But building something this large on the ocean was a huge challenge. It had to survive powerful waves, strong winds, and extreme weather. So engineers had to make it incredibly strong and stable. The result was almost like a giant industrial city floating in the middle of the ocean. But even this floating giant wasn't the largest machine humans ever created, because the next machine was one of the biggest ships ever built, and its size is even harder to imagine. Number 4. Seawise Giant. Ships have always represented human engineering, but one ship took that idea to an unbelievable level. The Seawise Giant, built in Japan in the 1970s, this massive supertanker was created to carry enormous amounts of oil across the ocean, and its size was incredible. It was more than 450 meters long. That's longer than the Empire State Building is tall. Imagine standing at one end and trying to see the other end. It would look incredibly far away. When fully loaded, the ship could carry hundreds of thousands of tons of oil. Its massive steel body was like a floating mountain, so moving slowly across the ocean. But size also created problems. The ship was too large for many normal ports, and it needed extremely deep water to operate safely. Even turning the ship required enormous amounts of space. Still, the Seawise Giant became one of the greatest examples of large-scale shipbuilding. But bigger machines were still waiting, because the final 3 machines would take engineering to an entirely different level. Number 3. Large Hadron Collider. Not all giant machines move. Some are hidden deep underground. The Large Hadron Collider is the biggest and most powerful particle accelerator ever built. Scientists created it to study the smallest pieces of matter, the tiny particles that make up everything around us. But the machine itself is enormous. Its underground tunnel stretches about 27 kilometers. That's longer than many cities. And inside this massive tunnel, powerful magnets guide tiny particles around a giant circular track. These particles can travel at almost the speed of light. Then, scientists smash them together at incredibly high speeds. The collisions can recreate conditions that existed just moments after the beginning of the universe. And that's what makes this machine so fascinating. It is one of the biggest machines humans have ever built, just to understand the smallest things in existence. But if you think the Large Hadron Collider is huge, the final 2 machines are truly unbelievable. Number 2, Bagger 293. Remember Bagger 288? This machine is even larger. Bagger 293 is one of the heaviest land vehicles ever created. Built for mining, it was designed to remove massive amounts of earth every day. It stands nearly 100 meters tall, its length is over 200 meters, and its weight is around 14,000 tons. Imagine a machine heavier than a fleet of airplanes, slowly moving across the earth. But even this giant is not number 1. Number 1, the largest machine ever built. There is one machine that completely changes the meaning of big. Not a truck, not a ship, not an excavator. Some machines are the longest, some are the heaviest, and some are the most powerful. But they all prove one thing. Human engineering has no limit. We keep building bigger, stronger, and more impossible machines. Which machine amazed you the most? Tell us in the comments. And subscribe to Apex Affluence for more incredible engineering stories.